Member for Saanich North and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, question period has been a mess this week. The official opposition has been asking important questions. You've been asking important questions, but unfortunately conflating two issues. The responses have been tragic, and the ministers are falling back on the 16 years narrative, which is getting pretty tired. So let me try. A number of weeks ago, my colleague from Oak Bay, Gordon Head, raised an important question about how the procurement process had changed at Work BC. We were worried on the impact that it could be having on the nonprofits doing excellent work in our province. We now have learned that two multinational corporations took 22% of the money for Work BC employment training contracts. That does not seem to fit the, quote, balance the minister said he'd found. The issue is the open procurement method, treating companies and nonprofits exactly the same, despite the vast differences in how they operate and their connection to the local community. The official opposition has been raising legitimate questions these past few days on how our community social service sector feels under attack by a series of changes that this government has introduced. My question is to the Minister of Social Services and Poverty Reduction. And I'm taking this directly from a recent quote from the Executive Director of Board Voice. Do we have any proof that an open procurement method is the best way to select vital social care services to our citizens?
Minister of Social Development, Poverty Reduction Strategy.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. The procurement process, and let me first step back and talk a little bit about Work BC, and then I'll respond to the question, the procurement piece. We know that what's been going on in the province, we've had the lowest unemployment rates in British Columbia for 19 months, the lowest rates across the country. What?
Members. Minister will try this once more.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The challenge with this, though, is while lots of people, the majority of people in the province have benefited, there are groups of people who have not realized that benefit. Persons with disabilities, Indigenous people, single moms escaping violence, and others. So we've restructured the Work BC program to much more clearly focus on supports over the coming years with those folks. The new process, which came into place April 1st, we're working closely with the providers to make sure we have a smooth implementation. In regard to the specific question about the nonprofits and what that balance looks like, under the previous program cycle, which ended on March 31st, 49% of all the contracts dollars went to nonprofits, 49% of all the contract dollars went to for-profit organizations. Under the new model, 57% of all the dollars are going to nonprofits, 39% are going to for-profit organizations, and 4% are going to a public institution that's providing support. In addition to those primary contractors, there are 130 subcontractors. 71% of those are nonprofits, which is an 11% increase under the past model.
Saanich North and the Islands on a supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll go back and review to see if that was actually an answer later, but nonetheless. Now let me pivot to another troubling issue regarding our social service sector, the other part of the issues that were being conflated this week. On one hand, it seems that global corporations are, rather than local nonprofits, are starting to take over more, the Social Care BC. On the other hand, it seems that the government is indeed favoring unionized workplaces with their low-wage redress agreement. I realize that this was a negotiated agreement between unions and healthcare providers, but there is a legitimate question on how this may impact the non-unionized, non-profit organizations. And I have family members that have talked to me about this directly, how it's impacting them. We know it's the case. Nonprofits already struggling are being hit twice in this province. They're competing against big multinationals, and and they are also potentially facing disruptive wage discrepancies that are likely to increase turnover and workplace tension. It is happening. I want an answer here that doesn't pivot to the last 16 years. I want the Minister of Social Development to please explain why the $40 million low-wage redress agreement couldn't also be applied to non-unionized nonprofits.
Minister, Social Development and Poverty Reduction Strategies.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thanks to the member again. The member may want to disconnect the history of the relationship of social service delivery in this province from what happens today. We can't do that. The reality is that we have seen a sector that has been under assault for an awfully long time, and it's a sector that we are working closely with to build a future here looking forward. A sector where we start to build the framework around how we deliver services to people in a whole array of areas, including around Community Living BC and in those initiatives. We're working with Board Voice. We're working with the Federation of Community Social Services. We're working with the CEO Network and a whole array of other groups to do that moving forward. It's a work in progress. I'm very confident that the system is getting stronger and that we are going to deliver the best, most effective social service programs this province has ever seen. We will overcome 16 years of debacle.